Good morning. Welcome to yet another K3 workshop.
Another one.
That is right, DJ Khaled, yet another one. This is on AI prompting. So we're kind of going back to the basics a little bit and um, diving into some things that we've heard from a lot of our community and our clients about just kind of understanding the basics of AI. We've talked a lot about AI agents and what they can do for you and building things in Copilot Studio and things like that. And the thing that we just keep kind of missing is the actual basic fundamental prompting of how we get different AIs to do what we want them to do. So real quick, do me a huge favor. In the upper right-hand corner, there is a little icon. That's a chat icon. Open that up. You all can chat with each other and see who all's in here. Let's get some conversation going. If you have questions, if you want to see something like you have a question about how do I prompt for this, let us know. We have our team on the back end. Melissa's standing backstage waiting to see your comments and your questions. So put those in the chat and we will answer those live as we get towards the end of the Q&A, but we have a lot to get through. So we only have an hour. Let's get going. So what we're going to go through is first, we're going to go through material selection. Which AI do we use, when, and why? There is no doubt we've all heard this where it's like you use ChatGPT, somebody else uses Perplexity, somebody else uses Claude or Gemini, and their statement always is, oh my God, you're using ChatGPT, you should totally be using Perplexity. They're wrong. They're not wrong. All of them have a different use case. So we'll get into what AI, when, and why. Then we're going to jump into architecting a prompt and exactly what that looks like. Then we'll kind of jump into using AI everyday functions in AEC. And then we'll kind of dive a little bit into quality assurance and figure out what happens when we prompt it and don't really get the response that we want. And of course, no party would be complete if we didn't bring in the safety manager at the end and have a little conversation about being responsible with AI and all that, which I know you've heard a million different times, but we're going to kind of walk into what that means. So not all AIs are and large language models are built the same. They all do different things. They all have different strengths. They all have different weaknesses. And so we're going to dive into that real quick just to kind of set the stage for where we're at. So for models, we've obviously got ChatGPT, right? Then we've got Perplexity, and we've got Claude, and we've got Gemini, and we've got Grok, which is the one that comes with Twitter, and we've got Microsoft Copilot. And then, of course, there's always private GPTs, which are right now picking up in popularity quite a bit. So let's kind of run through those just real fast and see what the best use case is, right? So ChatGPT 5, really good at creativity, good at planning. It's a really good balanced general use AI. An example in the AEC space would be brainstorming client-friendly languages for a request, proposal, RFP response, things like that. Perplexity, really good at research with citations. If you've ever used Perplexity, you will notice that after each one of those, you will see that they have a couple little squares with like 1, 2, 3, 4 in them. That's sources of where they pulled that from the web. So, case studies on sustainable architecture in similar clients as an example, right? Claude does really complex reasoning, really good at coding, really good at structured writing. So, like generate a Revit macro or a Dynamo script to automate certain tasks and functions. Claude's really good at that. Gemini, long document analysis. It's a multimodal, it's educational. That's being driven by Google. So You could upload a 300-page BIM manual and ask for a project phase specific checklist that's only 1 or 2 pages long, and it would be really good at that. Grok real time accurate referencing, not only from Twitter, like it's not just pulling from Twitter, it's pulling from a lot of different places, but because of that, it's got a lot of data. So, like, you could summarize new OSHA regulation updates relevant to construction. And MS Copilot, really deep integration with 365. You guys have probably already seen all of that, and enterprise security. And we're going to get into that a little bit down the road as to how you mix some of these things together and make them work in the way that you want after we get through some of the prompting stuff, right? So automating workflows, meetings, document reporting creation, tell me what's on my calendar today that's super high priority, summarize my week for me. Where did I spend the majority of my time? And then there's always obviously private GPTs, right? Now, the cool thing about private GPTs is looking above ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, Grok, things like that, it will leverage multiple models and encapsulate it all in a secure environment, which wraps enterprise security around what you're doing and what your employees are doing. So, when you're dealing with client files and internal documents and anything that might contain any kind of intellectual property or anything like that, that is really where the benefit comes in a private GPT and a lot more. And we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of all of this. So let's jump in now to architecting the prompt and exactly what that looks like. So it's important to understand AI doesn't know anything about you, your company, what you want from it. So we can kind of give ourselves a little bit of a leg up in this, in that we can go through and say, okay, if I'm going to focus a lot on ChatGPT here, just because it seems to be the most common one, but you can find very similar features in all of the other models. So in ChatGPT, once you sign up for an account, you go into your account and click on settings, and what you will see is there'll be a personalization tab, and you can tell it, remember references and memories, things like that, reference chat history, all that, things of that nature. And then one thing you'll see when you're in that personalization is at the very top of that, now highlighted with a little box, you will see custom instructions. This is important. So when you look at custom instructions, when you go into that screen, what you're going to see is it will allow you to personalize it, have it call you whatever you want it to call you. So refer to you by name. What type of voice and personality should it use? How should it respond? Should it respond like a Gen Z person, or chatty or witty or whatever? And then anything else that you want it to know. Now, this isn't the end of how you customize it, but this is the beginning, and it will start you off on the right foot. So, for example, when you look at how we're prompting ChatGPT for, really what we're looking at is, it's real simple. It's let's break it down. It is, give it a role, give it a task, give it context, give it constraints, and then give it an output format. So, for an example, you are a BIM coordinator. That's your role. It's real easy to tell this what to do as far as a role goes. I want you to act as a BIM coordinator. I want you to act as an architect with 25 years experience in commercial architecture or design or construction or whatever you might be looking for. Now, give it a task. What exactly do you want it to do? And we're going to dial this in, by the way. This is 101 level prompting, like just kind of understanding what you're looking for when you prompt any AI that's out there, right? Create a phased implementation plan for transitioning our firm's CAD library to Revit 2025, going from 2D to Revit 2025. That's the task that we want it to do. But let's give it a little bit of a fighting chance here with giving it a little bit of context. So the context is, assuming a mid-sized architecture firm of 20 employees, including milestones, risk points, and an estimated timeline. That's the context of or 50 employees. And then the constraints that you would build around it is, include the milestones, include the risk points, and give an estimated timeline. And then how do you want that format? In this one, we'll just do it in a table format. Super simple, right? Now, you can get super, super deep on that and say, I want it in a Gantt chart, or I want it in a 3-column system that says left column being this, middle column being this, right column being something else. So it's pretty wild how deep you can get and what it'll actually do. And so if I could leave you with any one thing starting out and going all the way through this, is that do not hesitate to get wild with your prompts. See what this thing will do. You'd be really surprised at how far you can push any of the AIs right now into how they interact with the prompts that you give it. And you can even ask it, how you want it to be prompted. So, and we're going to dive into that a little bit. So, as we talked about, give it a role, tell it who you're talking to. So let's dive just to the next level. By the way, for all of you that are here, and sound off in the chat over there and let us know who you are and where you're from, what company you're from, all that, and Melissa will see that on the other end and in the chat on the live there. We will be sending you a cheat sheet that's got a whole bunch of the stuff in this. So if you've registered for this and now you're here, we will be sending you a cheat sheet afterwards that will walk through a lot of this. You can kind of use it as a desk reference or whatever you want it to be, right? So let's talk about, so in the early pieces of, let's clearly define the audience, right? Explain it like I'm a client with no construction experience. So, in the construction industry, you guys talk about slump in concrete. Nobody, including me, has any clue what that means. So if you're struggling to explain what slump really means, ask ChatGPT. Define slump in concrete for a non-construction experience or architecture or engineering person. And it will do a great job of it. Or explain it for a senior structural engineer, or I'm an engineering student and I just got out of school and I don't have a clue what I'm doing. And I'm pretty sure my boss knows that. And so, I need a little bit of help before I get found out here at work, right? Ask for step-by-step reasoning. Walk through your thought process before giving the final answer. Tell this directly to ChatGPT, right? I want you to walk through your thought process before giving me your final answer. That way I can kind of confirm what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the reasons that you're coming up, the methodology you're using to come up with the things that you've come up with. Further define your constraints. We talked about context and constraints just a little bit ago. Keep responses under 300 words, or only list materials available in the U.S. market, or only return practices and materials that meet current building codes in Ding Dong, Texas. Yes, Ding Dong, Texas is a real place. I looked it up. Get super, super specific on your formatting when you're prompting GPT. You can return, I said this before, you can return this as a Gantt chart. Give me the results in 3 columns, with the left column being, the most appropriate approach, the middle column being appropriate approaches with moderate risk, and the right column being approaches with introducing significant risk into this project. Now, one of the things that we hear a lot about AI is it hallucinates, it invents stuff, it pretends that things are there that are not really there. And that's true. It does, in fact, do that. So you can tell it to not do that. And you can say, build your answers only on data that's known to be confirmed by industry professionals, guidelines, best practices, make no assumptions, don't hallucinate. If you can't find the correct answer, just let me know that you cannot find the correct answer. And this last one, I love this one and I use it all the time. But if you're going to use this one, put on your seatbelt, because you're in for a journey. And that is, ask it to ask you. Literally say, continue to ask me questions until you are 90% sure your answer, or 95 or 98. But grab coffee, because you're going to be there a while, because it will continue to ask you questions until it thinks that it knows exactly what you want from it. So with that, that's kind of the basics of prompting and how we get through building an effective prompt. And we'll go into some examples here. And the cheat sheet that we've developed has even more of those examples, but let's kind of get into what you all came here for, which is, yeah, I get it. I understand a little bit about how to prompt it. Maybe you understand a little bit more now. I hope you understand a little bit more now. Um, let's get into how do we prompt it specific for um, the AEC industry? What kind of tweaks can we give it? What can we tell it to do, right? As I said, as you get more comfortable with this, go wild, be bold, let that happen. Find the limit of what AI can do. To get you started, here are just a couple of examples, right? So, project planning. Create a detailed project timeline for 120,000 square foot mixed use building broken into design, permitting construction and commissioning phases. Include all dependencies. It will spit out stuff that would be pretty impressive. Is it going to do your job for you? No. Is AI going to replace you? No. Is somebody that knows how to use AI if you don't going to replace you? Maybe, because they're going to be way more efficient at their job. We've got this weird thing happening right now in the AI world where uh, uh, AI was supposed to take over a lot of the heavy lifting. And what we're doing right now is what we see a lot of people doing is they are leveraging AI for the creative side and the intelligence side, and then they're going to do the heavy lifting. It's the opposite of the way it should be. You're the one that is an architect, an engineer, a construction professional. Um, you're the one that's got the intelligence. Have it do the hard work for you. You already know what you want, but you could literally say, okay, I've got three different spreadsheets. There are 1,300 items in total. I want you to find the commonalities between all three of these spreadsheets and distill them down into a single document with all the columns, all the stuff, and it will do that for you. That's so let it do um, the heavy lifting for you. Design assistants going out and doing all the research. This is again the heavy lift. You know exactly what you want, but you don't want to go out and do all the research yourself. Great. Propose facade design elements that align with both LEED Gold and well building standard criteria, right? It will go through and it will define all of those things and say, okay, here's these design elements that fit into all the categories you need it to fit into. Think of it like you're hiring an intern and having it to go do, what you would consider with your background in education and expertise, somewhat level of busy work, right? Let it do what it's designed to do. Um, Construction management. Let's look at, summarize the key differences between the baseline schedule and the last 3-week look ahead for a high rise mixed use business and residential tower. It will go through and do all that for you. Now, obviously, you're looking at some of this and being like, okay, there's some stuff in here that I'm potentially not going to get, I'm not going to put into a public AI. At least I hope that's what you're saying, because you probably should be. And we're going to get into that as well. So this is more about things you can ask it. So kind of separate a little bit from a public AI like ChatGPT and Copilot and things of that nature, and just think more in terms of if I were to ask an AI questions, these might be some of the things that I would ask it, right? So, compliance and safety. Draft a compliance checklist for NFPA 101 life safety code for an assisted living facility. Client communications. We talked about this before, right? Summarize the attached 200-page geotechnical report into a 2-paragraph executive summary for a property developer. Nobody's going to look through, except for probably you guys, a 200-page geotechnical report. Certainly not an executive and certainly not at a summary level. So get that to do what you need it to do by just getting super inventive with these prompts. And by the way, again, if you have an idea where you're like, I've always wondered how you prompt about this, put it in the chat. We will throw it up in the comments. We're going to get to Q&A here in just a little bit. And when we do, we will jump into doing live prompting and answering your questions. So please, by all means, ask questions and we will get there. So quality assurance, right? This is another one. Did we get the results that we thought we were going to get? And when we don't, this happens a lot in AI. We see people that look at it like a novelty and they're like, I asked it a question, it didn't give me the answer that I wanted, and I just don't know that it's everything that everybody says it is, right? you have to start to massage that prompt a little bit and let it know that it's not quite where you want it to be, and it will learn from itself as it iterates over and over and over because it has that memory stored. It will continue to dial it in further and further and further and further. So as you know, some of the ways we get into that quality assurance component are, um, you know, if it's vague, add context, right? Don't summarize this project plan. Summarize this project plan for a client who doesn't understand construction jargon. Keep it under 250 words and highlight all the risks, right? Just be more verbose. Remember, this is not Google. We have been trained for 27 years now to type really short, concise things into Google to get the best search results. This is not Google. This is conversational. Think of it like walking into a shoe store and going, running shoes, and expecting the clerk to understand what in the heck you mean by running shoes. You wouldn't say that. You'd walk in and be like, look, I'm a distance runner. I run probably 15 miles a week. I've got a little bit of a pronation problem. I'm running in Sauconys right now. I don't know if I should go to something else. Now he has context. He's going to continue to ask you questions and say, do you have a high arch? Do you have a low arch? Do you want a flat-footed shoe? Do you want one with a heel lift in it? And you're going to get to the right shoe, but you're not going to get to that shoe any faster, or if at all, just by walking in and saying, best running shoe 2025, which is what you would do in Google, right? The benefit of AI is you can actually have a conversation with it, and it will dial in that answer and learn and start to give you a better answer, a more satisfying answer. So be patient with it. And the more you use it, the more it will continue to give you the answers that you want. Now, there's going to be times, make no mistake, there will in fact be times when AI is wrong. And you'll look at it and be like, I don't think that's right. And if you think it's wrong, tell it you think it's wrong. Say, explain your thought process step by step before giving me the final answer. Provide sources when available. Challenge it and say, I think you're wrong. I think it's this. And see what it says. It will oftentimes come back and go, yeah, you're right. I was mistaken. So there again, you'll see at the bottom of almost every single ChatGPT window or prompt window, it'll say, AI can make mistakes, right? That's true. It can make mistakes. So don't take it as the gospel, but use it as that assistant. And then when things, don't happen the way you want it to, ask it to clarify itself, ask it for sources, ask it where it got that idea, ask it directly, like, did you hallucinate this or is this real? Sometimes it will come back and actually tell you, I hallucinated that. I made that up. So don't be afraid to ask it to verify what it has done for you, right? If it misunderstands, you didn't get quite the response you wanted, it is okay to go through and refine again and again and again and say, you are a project manager for a hospital renovation. Draft a punch list for flooring installation issues. You are a city inspector in this city, in this state. What would you flag in this framing inspection report? Continue to dial that in and massage that again and again and deeper and deeper. Just keep adding context, and don't be afraid to go back into ChatGPT, copy the prompt that you gave it and paste it in, and then add a little bit more to it. And if you don't want to do that, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I think you misunderstood what I meant. Here is what I meant. And it will learn from that, and it will get a little bit smarter, and it will dial in the next answer just a little bit better, but it's going to take some time. But it's not any more time, in fact, it's a lot less time then you would probably spend researching all these things on your own using Google or industry resources or things like that. And certainly with doing heavy lifting as far as like project planning and document sets and data sets and things of that nature. So if it skips details, make it break it down, split them into different steps. So say, hey, list categories of risk for a $50 million mixed use project. Give me all that information now that it's got that. Go back and say, okay, for each category, give 5 detailed risks. Once it gives you those, now suggest mitigation strategies for each one of those risks. It will continue again to add on itself, to build on itself, but don't be afraid to be as verbose as possible. I cannot stress that enough. We continue to look at AI and prompt it in the way that we would talk to Google or any other search engine, and you can't do that and expect really great results. The best results you're going to get are going to be from being very verbose and giving it a great amount of detail. Now, if it feels flat, add style, right? It mirrors your tone, and the more you tell it about you or your company, the better it will do. And we'll get into that here in just a minute, and we'll give you an example of that. But you know, write this project update in clear, client-friendly language. Make the safety notice direct but approachable so that people understand this is a serious issue, but it's also not you being a jerk, right? Rephrase this RFP response in a persuasive, professional tone. And we'll show you here in just a minute how you can go through and kind of train it to say, I want you to understand more about me, more about my company, more about our brand, and how we how we approach the market, how we talk to our clients, what our language is, our tone of voice, things of that nature. Um, and if it stalls, iterate, right? Treat it like a junior employee. You wouldn't hire a junior architect, engineer, construction management person, whatever, to come in and expect them to know everything. This is why they're a junior person. So, too vague, expand on risks. Second draft, okay, now we're a little bit better. We're not quite as vague. Now format it as a table. Third draft, add a column for a responsible party. That's, continue to push the envelope and say, I want you to break this down step by step by step, because it may not get the full context of everything that you're giving it from a prompting perspective. So that is kind of the basics of prompting. And again, the cheat sheet that we're going to give you has a lot more examples in there. If you ever run into an issue, and I don't care if you're a K3 customer or not. This isn't a sales pitch by any means. I don't care if you're a K3 customer or not. If you ever run into issues and be like, we would like to have, here's the way that we at XYZ Architects or ABC Construction, this is how we generally use AI within our business. And we would love to have you guys do a training of sorts for our organization. Please let us know. Well, we're more than happy to do that. So as I said, the party's not a party until the safety manager shows up. I think we all know that, right? So let's talk a little bit about maybe not summoning Cyber OSHA into what we're doing with ChatGPT. And I know you guys hear this all the time. You hear about security. Trust me, I'm a marketing guy. I'm not a cybersecurity guy. So, but it's real. And what we hear a lot is we're not a target. We're too small. We're too this. We're too that. That's really not the case. So if you think back of this guy did a demo one time of Twitter to a bunch of old people at the Lions Club. And basically, this girl had basically said, home alone after school, bored, blah, blah, blah. What do I do? This guy live jumped into the Twitter API, found a bunch of information, and basically triangulated her location within about 50 yards. Everybody in the audience was terrified, including me. But this is what hackers do. This is what threat actors do. And they don't necessarily do it because you're a $1 billion company or $1,000 company. They do it for the novelty of doing it. And if you think about the aggregate of, we're going to expose company data, we're going to expose client data, whatever, even though it's not worth $10 million, it might only be worth, maybe your company can only afford $5,000 and they know that. Those $5,000 add up. Threat actors operate in this way where every little data point is a good data point. We're putting a puzzle together. So it may not be like, this is super incriminating information. It might be, that this is just a small little piece and you think it's fairly innocuous and not that big of a deal. Once we have enough puzzle pieces to put together, then it becomes a big deal. So one puzzle piece doesn't really matter, but if we can collect 6 or 8 or 10 or 20 or 30 about your company, then we can start to put things together. So first things, very important, AI is generative. It is not inventive. So we're in the world right now of artificial or generative artificial intelligence, what they call narrow AI, or you might have heard called dumb AI. We're not to artificial general intelligence, certainly not to artificial super intelligence. This is generated based on things that it already knows. So why is that important? Um, because if you give it intellectual property to train on, it will train on it, and it will also generate on it, not only for you, but for your competition. So if you have trade secrets, if you have things that you think are pretty unique to your business, um, you're potentially handing that information over to not only hackers or threat actors, because by the way, yeah, it's also hackers, definitely hackers. The more they can put together, the better things are, right? Um, but you are potentially handing over to them um, things about your business. So I can go into an AI and say, XYZ architecture firm, tell me everything you know about them. Tell me about the latest ways to accomplish a task or whatever. Let's talk about unique approaches to thermal bridging, and there might be something that you have figured out that nobody else has really figured out. One of those test points of does it think, is it smart, or is it just responding to um, things that it already knows and things that it understands? We can prove that because if you spend enough time, you can convince AI that you have built a stand mixer in your kitchen that will go 45,000 RPMs. Any intelligent person in the world would be like, no, you haven't. Like, there's so many limitations there that there's no way you did that. But if you convince it that you did, and then you convince it that you're mixing potato salad, and then you tell it that your potato salad is now giving off light, it's not going to think on its own. It will literally tell you that your potato salad is beginning to plasma. So this is what I mean by it is inventive in nature, right? Again, this is one of these things that geeks like us do for fun, is we go in and see what we can get ChatGPT to agree to, right? So like when we can get it to agree with us that our potato salad is plasming, about to let go, that's what we do. So um, some of the risks you need to look out for when you're prompting. And again, do not let these be a limitation for how you use ChatGPT. Don't be afraid of it any more than you would be afraid of using this kind of stuff for Google, right? Or any place else you would put it on the web. Just a little bit of thought process, right? If you paste a proprietary BIM model description, RFP response, things like that. Over time, these pieces and languages and strategies all add together, and that's when we come up with intellectual property risks. There's confidentiality risks. What things did you have with your client? What agreements? What project details? What internal communications? Keep in mind that those things add up over time, and now you're training a public GPT on it. Probably about a year and a half ago, a friend of mine, I saw him at the gym, and he was like, how do I get ChatGPT to create a PowerPoint for me? And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, an actual PowerPoint. And I was like, you don't, ChatGPT doesn't do that. And he was like, okay, that adds up. He's like, because I uploaded our quarterly financials to it and asked it to create a PowerPoint, and it came back with a bunch of information, but it didn't actually come back with a .pptx file. And I said, wait a minute, you did what? He was like, yeah, just uploaded an Excel sheet with our quarterly financials. And I was like, to a public GPT that you don't control. He was like, oh yeah, I see the problem there. I was like, yeah, let's not do that, any more of that in the future, right? Cybersecurity risks, right? At the low end, you're unknowingly helping your competition. At the high end, you could expose your company to a cybersecurity event. Sensitive data is intercepted, logged, misused, things like that. So just things to just kind of be aware of as you go through this prompting. Just kind of think like, um, would I want this thing put up on a billboard? Is it okay if I share this thing with the public? Would I say this to somebody who's not part of this project, right? If you cannot definitively answer whether or not you're doing as a risk, stop and ask somebody in the know. Ask a coworker, ask a manager, ask your business technology partner. If you don't have one, call us and just say, hey, we're thinking about doing this with AI. What do you think? We're more than happy to answer that question. And if you have those questions right now, like, hey, where's the limited scope of use, et cetera, like what are the risk points, whatever, put them in the chat over there. We will answer questions here at the end. We've got a couple of our engineers on the back end, and we will coordinate that. And uh, you know, we'll um, we'll get into that, right? We already see that there's um, you know, like we already saw one of the questions about, why shouldn't it be on a public app like ChatGPT? Why is that? So we're kind of getting into that now a little bit, right? Um, um, so yeah, never put proprietary information into um, into an AI, because of the things you can expose and the pieces of the puzzle that you put together. So in short, kind of treat it like an intern that you don't entirely fully trust just yet, right? And if you want to go wild, if you want to get a lot deeper, and there's a lot of people out there that are doing this now pretty actively, right? Consider secure enterprise environments. Microsoft Copilot can use ChatGPT. It's technically Azure OpenAI, and they encapsulate that within your tenant and lock it down so that they're getting the power of OpenAI's ChatGPT model, but they're not training the model on that information. They're not sending that information out. So those are some of the ones that exist. So for example, you can go into Copilot. This is Copilot right here, and you can go in and say, I want you to use Smart GPT, quick response. I want you to think a little bit deeper about your answers, right? So again, there's the thing with different models in that um, they will think for you, and they'll either do deep research or they'll just give you a surface answer. You can go into Perplexity or Claude or Grok and say, I want you to do deep research on something. And it'll take it 20, 30, 45, 60, 90, 180 minutes to come back and actually give you a real answer, right? So, as I said, one of the benefits of using things like Microsoft Copilot, customer data, prompts, responses, etc., is not used to train the foundational large language models. Even when you use ChatGPT, it's not going to use that, right? Use of OpenAI, ChatGPT within Microsoft Copilot and Azure. Um, it's not the public iteration of ChatGPT that you would think it is, and so it's subject to Microsoft's security measures and gets encapsulated within that environment. And then it also follows a lot of your data residency compliance requirements as far as geographical region and things like that. So, how does it do all that? Part of it is part of your compliance framework, right? It operates within your organization's existing Microsoft 365 compliance frameworks. It respects the policies such as GDPR, EU data boundaries, other things that you've done within that compliance framework within your Microsoft tenant. Now, the reason that there's a little yellow triangle next to that is because if it is configured correctly. Now, that's a broader problem, obviously, but this relies on, are my policies configured correctly within ChatGPT or within the Microsoft tenant? Same thing goes for data loss preventions, right? It inherits and enforces all of your organization's Microsoft Purview DLP policies, which is data loss prevention, to prevent unauthorized sharing of sensitive data if it's configured correctly, right? Same thing goes for access controls, respects all the permissions and all the things that are there if it's configured correctly. Same thing goes for auditing and e-discovery, right? It'll log all the stuff for e-discovery capabilities, keeps you legal and compliant and all that if it's configured correctly. So if you don't know if it's configured correctly, make sure you talk to your IT staff or your business technology partner or whoever that may be to make sure that you're not leveraging. So it's one thing to be like, okay, we have, certain policies that may not be exactly where we want them to be. And we have this repository that's got, a couple of files in it that aren't a death blow if they get shared, but probably aren't the greatest thing, but it's not something that's going to worry us too much. And then what you end up with is you get into that complacency component where you're like, okay, we're okay with that because we know that's an issue, but it's not a huge issue. When these data compliance policies start to flow through to other parts of your Microsoft environment, and now you start asking an AI all these different questions, it starts to pull pieces together, the ones that you're not too terribly worried about, and the ones that you probably would be super worried about. So if you're in that mode where you're thinking, okay, let's kind of focus on how do we really take an AI model to the next level. One of those ways is that you launch a private GPT. Now, obviously, we K3 have a private GPT. Do others have private GPTs? Yes, they're everywhere. Is ours better? Absolutely, it's better. If it wasn't, I wouldn't work here. Of course, it's better. It's the best private GPT out there. But you get the point that I'm trying to make is that once you really dial in this power and you're like, okay, we really want this thing to do something super cool. Like, let's say, for example, we want it to be an HR agent within our organization, or we really want to start like focusing in on a lot of the Revit models or some of the BIM models we put in there or whatever. And we want to like really train it to do very, very specific stuff within our organization and answer a lot of really cool questions. Um, you can do that. And you can do that with a private GPT that works inside of your organization and um, really starts to understand more about your company and what you do, and it will really really fine tune just a ton of those answers. So, again, this is a prompting class, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the data security piece, simply because that is one of the big things that we see happen a lot is if you're not comfortable with it being on a billboard, if you're not comfortable sharing it in an open forum or on a stage somewhere or something to that nature, then just really kind of think twice about, um, is this something I should be putting into a GPT? Other than that, and I would really encourage you, even outside of work, just to empower yourself, go create a ChatGPT account, get a Perplexity account, get a Grok account, things like that, and go in there and just really a Claude account. Start hammering it with all kinds of stuff, all the crazy ideas you've had your entire life, the ones the questions you come up with at happy hour with your friends and your coworkers on a Friday at 5:30. You're like, I don't think we know the answer to that. Literally start prompting it for everything under the sun. What you will quickly learn is what works, what doesn't work, and how far you can take it. And I'm telling you, I mean, you can take it really, really far, like really, really far. So um, that takes us to um, the uh, Q&A phase of this, right? So we're about 15 minutes left in this session. I want to know what questions you have. We have Ian Romero Cormac in the background. I'm more than happy to bring them up on stage and we can have conversations with them. Ryan is one of our, he's actually a director of our innovation lab. So that's one of those things, for example, right? Like we as K3 are so focused on AI that we built an innovation lab that's literally what it's focused on is what's coming next. And right now, everything we're focused on is AI. So we believe in it that much. We think it's that going to be that much of a game changer. But if you have questions, if you have live prompts you want to work through, put those in the chat, put those in the comments, and we will see them. And um, we will bring them up on screen and we will do a live prompting demo. So one of the attendees asked, if an AI agent gets off track in its response, is it better to restart the prompt from the beginning? That's a great question, actually. I'm going to actually, um, I'm going to bring up my friend Ian Romero and bring him up on screen with me here for just a moment. And hi, Ian.
What's up, man? Awesome
How are you?
job.
Thank you.
Good.
Um, So yeah, so the question is, um, if a if an AI gets off track in a response, is it better to restart the prompt from the beginning? What are your thoughts on that?
I've seen varied results. That happens a lot because I go off track a lot, more so. So it's more so my fault than the AI's fault. But I think I've seen cases where I can kind of, if there's specific things it keeps calling out, that I know are way off track on what I'm trying to do or what kind of information I'm trying to get out of it. I've seen cases where I can say, hey, you keep talking about X, Y, and Z. For the purposes of whatever we're prompted about, let's try to exclude information like that. Um, there have been other cases where I've gotten a chat that was just so discombobulated that I'm like, okay, it's time to start over here. So I think if you can, you can probably try to course correct it at first, and if you see that it's still just not really getting it, it might be better to just kind of start all over from scratch.
Yeah, I think what we do on the K3 side, at least, a lot of times is we will go in and say, okay, after something spins out of control a little bit, and say, forget everything you know about this topic. Let's start fresh. Like erase your memory, and it will. It'll forget everything it knows, and then when you prompt it again, it will go through and remember what it had. It'll start to reindex and reformulate. What you want it to know. But so, like, we were talking earlier about uh, the more you tell it, the better answers it can give you. So I want to give you an example of that. And Ian, you're still kind of on screen. They just can't see you, but they can hear you. So like if I go into ChatGPT as an example, as an example, and say, tell me everything you know about K3 technology, limit it to only things I've told you,
This
and it
is
will.
where we're gonna find out what Eric's told GPT about me.
Right, right. So yeah, core identity, right? We're a business technology partner with offices in Denver and Dallas. We're not an MSP. We think people don't understand what the term MSP is, and we think that's a company that manages services for you, and that's not what we do. We do that, but we zoom way out and say, let's really look at the business outcomes first. Um, uh, our positioning is technology for business sake, not technology for technology's sake. What differentiators do we have, right? We zoom out and take a look at the customer's business. We aim to make clients a better business, not just a better customer. We think if we can make you a better business, you will automatically be a better customer, right? Like that's just kind of how that works. We do for you, and that return comes back to us, right? We have a strong focus on education. Service pillars: Catalyst, Empower, Secure, the three big things we do. All of our AI stuff fits underneath Empower. All of our baseline models fit underneath Catalyst. We're ISO 27001 certified. We're recognized in the Inc. 5000. Um, we're known as innovators in AI. We've won several awards on that. Our leadership is Kelly and Ian. Our vertical expertise is architecture, engineering, construction, creative design industries, and manufacturing. Our culture and our values. So again, pay attention to this part, because this is where it derives a lot of its information from. How do we best answer the questions when we're asking things about K3? Um, our culture and values. We're value driven, collaborative, and transparent. We have an emphasis on strategic IT, not just IT or break fix IT. We have high touch support, strong focus on business first technology outcomes. Our brand archetype. We're a mix of the creator, the ruler, the sage, the explorer. Our tone of voice is funny, casual, respectful, and enthusiastic. So the point that I'm trying to make there is that when you give it the information that you want it to have, it will form way better opinions or ideas around what you ask it. So, again, nothing proprietary in there. We're very, very careful about, there's plenty of stuff we could have put in there that would have been bad, but none of that was in there. So, hopefully, we kind of got off track there a little bit with the question of, if an AI gets off track in its response, is it better to restart the prompt? Having it know a little bit more about your company and a little bit more about you and a little bit more about what you do and your background, your education, et cetera, helps kind of constrain it a little bit. But yeah, you can try to bring it back in. You can say, look, I think you're off track here. Here's what I really want to accomplish. If it goes haywire, kind of like when you're in one of those meetings where everybody just kind of like nobody understands what the heck the meeting's about anymore, and you're like, you know what? Everybody go home. We're going to do this meeting again tomorrow, and we're just going to start over. And everybody goes home and clears their head, right?
Well, I think a couple things related to this. If this is specific to like, hey, I'm researching a certain topic and I'm trying to get valid information, and you just kind of see it feeding you things that you know are wholly inaccurate. Something I do a lot in those scenarios is I tell it, hey, whatever information you tell me, I need you to provide a source for me so I can actually go and validate that wherever you're pulling this information from is actually accurate. An example of that, I was doing some research on CMMC compliance a couple of weeks ago, and initially the answers they were given, it was giving me, they were somewhat vague. I could tell there was probably some hallucinations mixed up in there. So then I basically just asked the exact same question, but I said, hey, this time I want you to point me to the sources. Next thing you know, I was pulling information from NIST websites and other publications that I could tell actually official, and it's giving me much better answers. I think something else to keep in mind, if you're thinking more about repetitive tasks, an example of that for me, I'm involved in creating a lot of scopes of work for projects over here. Um, that's where I think GPT projects can really come into play if you're using GPT. And basically, the whole concept of a project is you can actually give it instructions. So actually, can I share my screen here?
You can, yes. And I have to put it up there, but yeah, you can.
Let's see.
Yeah, give me half a second here. There you go. Now your screen is shared.
Yep, there we go. So, you can see I have these different projects. So, we're ISO 27001 compliant. So sometimes we have a fractional chief information security officer, but I also kind of run some of these objectives on my own as well. So I'll kind of lean on this project, the vCISO project, which I've kind of given it instructions on how I want it to act like my chief information security officer in responses it gives me. Same thing on the COO Copilot. So that's the idea behind that is essentially assistant to COO, and it's usually kind of staff and things or more operational questions I ask that one, and it has context. This project scoping one is probably the one I use the most. And as you can see, I've given it very specific instructions on how I wanted to write the scope of work for a project. Down to here's the different sections we're going to have in here. We're going to have a scope of services. I should clearly outline the work to be completed. I even kind of give it, this is how I want it to spell out the order of the projects and the various phases of the projects. That we always want to do a project risk management and security review. So I point out that, hey, this should always be part of the scopes that we create. Um, we go through deliverables and milestones. So, I have it help me carve out deliverables and milestones. Is there anything that shouldn't be included as part of this project? So when I'm going over this with the client, they should know that X, Y, and Z is not part of the project. Any requirements the client should know about, and then potential risk and mitigation plans. Um, so, to Eric's point, the more information you give it, the better. I'm just going to do a pretty generic one though, so it can show us what it can come out with kind of minimal information even. I need to create implementation. So if I would have fed this more context, this would be even more detailed. But you can see it followed essentially, or it's following the structure that I gave it. So it's giving me the objective, even down to the business goals, the same way I had it outlined in the instructions. scope of services, so it's telling me the various phases that we might have as part of this project, and then exclusions, deliverables, and milestones, requirements for the client, and so on. And it's kind of catering that specific to the info I gave it. If there were more caveats to the project and so on that I would have fed it, it probably would have done this even better. For us, I would say, or for me personally, I'd say this, stuff like this, I still have to go in and do, call it 15 to 30 minutes of cleanup, make sure it's all accurate, add things that may not have been aware of, and so on. But it used to take me 2 hours to put together a scope of work like this. So something that used to take me 2 hours, but it only takes me 15 to 30 minutes now. That's a significant time savings. But going back to the point of the project, if we're really trying to keep the AI assistant kind of on track and on whatever topic that we're typically going to be using that for, I think projects are really good for giving it those specific instructions on how you want it to respond to things. And you can always edit those instructions. So if you see that specific project is kind of going off task pretty often, you can just go and tweak the instructions and hopefully prevent that from happening as often.
Yeah, and I kind of want to point out like the prompt that you put in there, right? Again, as we've said, it's not Google, like be verbose. And think of this like a brand new employee, right? They come in on the first day and you're like, I mean, they graduated school or they did this or, but they're new to this industry. They don't know anything versus a weekend and you're like, that kid's showing some promise, right? They might actually work out. And then a month in, you're like, wow, they pretty impressive, right? Like they've really come up to speed really quick. AI is absolutely no different. Um, what one of the other questions? I'm going to jump to another question because I know we're short on time here and we've got about 3 minutes left. Is there a way to use AI with our company's software products, like for example, a SaaS product? Um, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is there's a lot of dependencies, right? So Copilot through agentic AI and building different things in Copilot Studio can integrate with a lot of the stuff that you do. Not everything that you do, and at various levels, and it depends on how open that piece of software is and how it operates and all of those things. If you're looking for like a Chat GPT integration, generally not unless you're going to buy like a OpenAI what they call an API license where you can integrate directly through the SaaS product. But if it's a SaaS product somebody else owns, might be a little bit tougher to do that. Private GPTs is stands a way stronger chance. Would you agree with that, Ian?
I think so. The private GPTs tend to be a lot more flexible for sure in terms of what you can and can't do.
Yeah. So the benefit of Microsoft is, let's talk about Copilot for example. Even though it's within your tenant and they have a lot of tools built in, they're producing for the masses, right? So they're the best for the most. We think these are the tools that the most people are going to want. If you have a really specific use case, they're probably not designed to do that, at least not yet, and probably not in the long run either. At least in anywhere in the next 18 to 24 months. As to where private GPTs are really kind of custom built for your business and what you do and how you operate. So you stand a way stronger chance, and you also um, tighten down your security a little bit more when you do like a private GPT and something like that. I don't know who asked that question. It didn't give me a name in the in the chat, but it talk to us, like call us. Conversations are always free. We're not gonna be like, hey, yeah, we'd love to answer that question. It'll be $150 an hour. Like, give us a chat, give us a call. Email us, whatever, and we'll sit down and chat with you and be like, tell us what your problem is, and we'll be more than happy to kind of, steer you down the road of where we think you should go. And if K3 is the right fit, great. If not, that's totally cool too.
Yeah, I guess what I would add to that too, it really depends on what systems you're trying to integrate with. I think there are kind of some things out of the box that are ready to go in Copilot, and that's kind of the what's good for most to the point that Eric made. When it comes to either legacy systems or even systems that may have APIs, but there's just not an out of the box integration with Copilot, that's kind of where we see more pain points with finding a way to integrate that information. Whereas if we go with the private GPT, especially in our case, we have a team that can help figure out, how do we transform that data, export it to a place where the GPT can read off of it, or develop a kind of a custom middleware to integrate with the API or the database.
Yeah. So like Ryan, our director of DevOps, he made a good point in the on the back end here is that we were able to use a bunch of SaaS data from different ticketing systems into a private GPT that we built for us, where it becomes a knowledge base, where it's no longer just like, do we have the right, are we asking the right questions or not? It is literally we go through and ask it, and it comes up with intelligent solutions. Like, look at this. Like, we've asked it questions around Revit and BIM modeling and all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, we've done it. Like, we're eating our own dog food. That's we use private GPTs internally a lot for a lot of different things, for that exact reason. So, I know we're at time. I greatly appreciate everybody who's here. It looks like we have quite a few people on. Again, any questions, any concerns, any confusion, anything we didn't cover, please let us know. Reach out to us, shoot us a message on LinkedIn, email us hi@k3text.com. Pretty simple to remember. Give us a call, go to our website, hit the contact form, k3text.com. We're always happy to have a conversation. No sales pitches. That's kind of a firm belief when we do these workshops, is that they're actually a workshop where we want you to get value. It's not a sales pitch. But if there's anything we can help with, by all means, let us know. And other than that, we will see you in September with yet another workshop as we start to kind of talk about looking at technology from a 2026 perspective. So let's start to kind of dive into, as we enter into Q4. It's almost Christmas. God, it's almost Christmas time, Ian. That's
I know.
ridiculous.
Did you buy me a present yet?
I've had it for a year. I bought it in January. Bought it for 9 months.
There we go.
So yes, yeah. So I know we are at time. Thank you, everyone. I will return you to your day, but we'd love to hear from you. And again, cheat sheet coming your way probably in the next 24 hours. Might be later today, might be tomorrow morning, but we will get a cheat sheet in your hands. And we will talk to you all later. Thank you so very much. Thanks for joining me, Ian.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Eric, and thanks everyone.
All right, guys. We'll see you.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.